You know, something very nice just happened to me. A man came up to me and he handed me his Purple Heart. Now, I said to him, is that like the real one or is that a copy? And he said, that's my real Purple Heart. I have such confidence in you. And I said, man, that's like big stuff. I always wanted to get the Purple Heart. This was much easier.
Think of it from a practical standpoint. I'm standing there with generals and military people in a cemetery. And I look at them, I say, these people are suckers and losers. Now, think of it. Unless you're a psycho or a crazy person or a very stupid person, who would say that anyway? But who would say it to military people with military? Because as President of the United States, I would say if I made that statement, if I have generals here, I would imagine that most of them would end up in a major fist fight with the president, okay? And you know what? I would have said it was okay in that one instance. They made up a story. They just, out of thin air, just like a lot of the fake stories are made up by these people, because they're among the most dishonest people in the country, the fake news.
Donald Trump and the RNC have sued Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer in an attempt to stop them from using VA offices to register voters.
From this day forward, I better not see a Republican at all say, I support the troops, because your figurehead is suing Veteran Affairs for registering us to vote, as well as designate Veteran Affairs offices, some of them, as voting places. You know, because we don't have enough polling places as it is, why not get some secure areas that the government controls? The Trump campaign and the Republican National Committee sued Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer and others Monday for allowing federal Veteran Affairs and Small Business Administration sites to be used for voter registration. And don't forget, your guy hates people like me. You know, 100% permanent and total disabled combat vets. We're losers and suckers. If you truly support troops, you're going to go to vote.gov, register to vote, and make sure you're voting blue this election.
Here's my question to the group. Is it savable? I mean, why not abolish the VA, take all of the money that we are otherwise spending and go to any willing provider system within our communities, and then if people get bad care, they can vote with their feet, and you don't have a two-tier system of healthcare in this country.
Restricting access to voter registration is egregious enough, but to do it specifically to veterans is utterly disgusting. And it's not just access to voting that the right wants to strip away from veterans.
This is Project 2025. This is what they want to do for veterans. Eliminate disability compensation. That'll save them that much. Eliminate a huge portion of veterans getting care at the VA. Narrow eligibility so less veterans have access. Put a 10-year time limit. So if you don't get access to the VA in the 10 years after you get out, you never will. Republicans, conservatives, hate veterans.
Donald Trump claimed to be incapacitated by bone spurs so that he would not have to serve and let somebody go to war in his place. And that spirit continued through his presidency. We saw it in the report that he referred to those who gave their lives for this country as suckers and losers. By the way, a report that did not originate from some Democratic opposition research machine. It originated from his own chief of staff. Somebody who couldn't be bothered to attend a ceremony at Normandy because it was raining. And maybe more importantly, because we can talk about the past, but every election is about the future, somebody who's proposed tax cuts for the rich and whose so-called Project 2025 agenda, if you take 5 minutes reading through that online, clearly entails cuts to care for veterans.
Bandit shit.
And I just think about that compared to last night, where not a lot gets in the way of bath time being on schedule in our household. We got toddlers, but we deferred bath time. They watched Frog and Toad, and Chasten and I watched the press conference as the President of the United States reminded the country how much our alliances matter, what it takes to actually secure this country. And explain that in terms of everything from military relationships to industrial policy. That's the kind of leader that we want and need for our military, for our national security, for our military families, and for our veterans. And that's what it's like to have a presidency and a campaign that takes national security and service seriously.
Considering all that's going on a daily basis, it would be very easy for this sort of story to fall by the wayside, or for even people who try to stay tapped into what's happening in politics to think that it's not that important. But I think that it really is, and not just for the substance of what they're doing to veterans, but for what it represents. Donald Trump and the Republican Party have, for as long as we've been alive, been claiming to support the troops. And yet if you support them so much, if you venerate them the way you say, wouldn't you want them to be able to participate in our democracy? And it's so callous and hypocritical the way that Donald Trump is attempting to use veterans as a tool to sow distrust in our voting system, implying that for some reason that he's never actually going to explain that having veterans be able to vote in a place that is for them convenient, the VA offices, somehow magically makes the voting system more insecure for everyone. There are, as of right now, only 8 states in America that don't allow online registration, and Michigan, importantly, is not one of them. So think about what that means. You can go online and you can register in your house. You can do it in a park. You can do it on a bus, but you can't do it at the VA. That place, uniquely, you should be restricted from registering to vote. Now, that doesn't make any sense for me. It might not make sense to you, but they imply that it makes sense to them. And think about how it would hit certain communities harder than others. Almost 13% of America's entire homeless population is veterans. They're the ones who might most need access to easy and convenient voter registration. They might not have the means to simply do it online from home the way you or I might, and this is going to actively disenfranchise them. And because veterans are so heavily represented in this community, it is another way that they're hurting veterans. So this is important on the substance. It's important for what it represents, but it's also important for what it means for our election coming up later this year. Michigan is still very much a swing state. It is likely, like it did in 2020, to come down to just a handful of votes. And this is not the only way that the Trump campaign and the Republicans are trying to restrict some people's access to voting, but it's a significant one, because when you add these different groups of disenfranchised Americans up, it might be enough to allow Donald Trump and the Republicans to squeak out a win. And if nothing else coming out of this video, it should serve as a reminder to you of how vigilant we need to be going into November. They're not going to be any more honorable than they were in 2020. They're not going to be any more accepting of the actual results of the election than they were in 2020. And if you want to come out of this election having an actual democracy, you're going to need to prepare yourself for the fight and stay vigilant. When you click the join button and become a Tier 2 member, you get access to all of our weekly top 10 lists. What are you waiting for?